Correct. So it took about 6 months. In the meantime, interesting about life. In the meantime, I meet two brothers in the classroom. Cubans, non-Jewish. They had the uncle that brings them to school every morning. We were about 14, 15 at the time. Picks them up. Very nice individual, very friendly. But in LA, it does not rain too frequently. But when it rains, it can rain for several days. So I had the chutzpah, they say, the goal to ask him, do you mind if you take me to the bus stop? Because I had to walk about 4 or 5 blocks from the school to the bus. I said, sure. And he said to me, yeah, I said, gladly. And we did that several times. And he says, I can see you're alone. I can see that you need some ambiente criollo, a little bit of Cuban environment. And even though I'm not Jewish, I am going to go to the administration of the place you're at and see if they will release you to us on weekends so you can be with our family. Well, it's interesting that in one of those trips, and now, take this thing, he would drive, because then I was transferred to the main place that's called Vista del Mar, even though it's got a Spanish name, started as a Jewish orphanage. He would drive the distance, equivalent distance, from Kendall to Aventura, 4 times to pick me up, take me back, like that. So 120 miles on a Sunday, 4 trips. And in one of those trips, he says, Marcus, 2 things. 1, in this country you got to study. Sin papelito no vale para nada. You need to study. And number 2, you need to learn Hebrew. Hebrew. What do I need Hebrew for? I got no problems learning English. What do I need Hebrew for? Now, these are the Catholic individuals. Says, Marcus, you're Jewish. The Jews have contributed along to the world. And the only way you're going to learn about your background, about the culture, about the history, about everything is through the language. And you got to do it. I said, it went in one ear, went in out. What he was telling me that he was not realizing that 17 years later, I would be the head of an Israeli bank in town. And then at that point, that advice came on handy. And I immediately started learning Hebrew. So today I have the pleasure, when I'm with Margarita alone, to practice with her in the language. But anyway, there were very, very interesting years in Cuba, growing up with the Jewish community, with the non-Jewish community. The settlement here, after we came up, my brother had gone on the first Aliyah, the first movement to Israel. My parents arrived just before the beginning of the missile crisis, and we all moved to Atlanta. So in Atlanta is where I learned, where I finished my high school and finished my degrees in accounting and international business. And then I came back to Miami to start in banking, which I've done all these years. In the meantime, I became active in the Cuban Hebrew congregation on the board, and to the point finally I rose to be president for several years. Twice I've been president, and I've been following. And I say, I jokingly say I'm already old enough to be a museum piece. So I've been interviewed by them over the years, and the experience of being a Cuban Jew is quite interesting. And it's amazing. One of the things you find out how something that is done today is interpreted differently many years later. One thing that have not been said was that it was said about the Cuban, and the Cuban was an official name of the Cuban Hebrew congregation of its bulletin. However, a few years ago, I don't know if you remember this incident, there's a man who I don't think at the time was an active member of the congregation, but he had requested a special license plate, Florida license plate, that said Cuban. He gets a letter from the Department of Motor Vehicles recalling the nameplate, which he basically fought. Why? Because if you read Cuban from right to left, says ban Jews. But this came up 30 years later. And he fought it and he won it. Then I started seeing him at the congregation for a while. So, as far as we're concerned, having grown in both in Cuba and here, we have a wonderful community. You will see each one of us in every aspect of life, whether it's teaching at the university. As a matter of fact, one of our former deans of the College of Arts and Sciences, a Cuban Jewish fellow by the name of Mark Suma, who's retired, and he was in the class behind mine in the Jewish school in Havana. You see them in medicine, you'll see them in architecture, you see them in engineering, you see them in every facet of life. Business, some of the names, have you seen Movado? Any of you have done a Movado? That's a Cuban Jewish family. As a matter of fact, the wife was the teacher of mine one time. So, I just want to tell you that, to wrap up, is that you're dealing with experts on the matter. Whatever you read about them is accurate. It's not the things that you may, you say, well, this is true, it's not true. They have documented themselves very well. They spoke to the people. They have the recordings of the individuals that were interviewed. One of the things also I want to say is that when the Freedom Flight started in 1965, the Cuban Jews were instrumental in having a kiosk right at the airport, because these people were spent just about almost a day before leaving Cuba. And many of them were little kids that went through the ordeal of leaving Havana to come, and they were taken to the Opalaca airport. This was also a program that was developed by Bernardo Vélez, whose name was mentioned, who was one of the 4 founders of the Cuban Hebrew congregation. And I'll tell you, when I used to come from Atlanta, I would go there, and I remember Mrs. Egosa being one of them. There's one of the pictures that you're there in the kiosk, right? In Opalaca. Remember that? Well, you may not remember, but you're there. I have been fortunate that even I was criticized as growing up that I was taking film. The kids, our teenage group, used to criticize me for, you know, always being around with a camera, which I'm still do to this day. Those films later on, as they had kids and they were growing up, one day I got a call. I said, Marcus, would you please bring your film over? We want to watch it one night. Well, come on. Now, after 20 years, you used to complain and used to curse me and all that. Why do you want to see him now? He says, because our kids now are our age who were back then. We want to show them that we were also teenagers like they were. So I did not write, but I contributed to a video, the first video of the Cuban Jewish community here. It's called the history of the Cuban Jewish community, 1890s, 2009. Based on a lot of the film footage that I took over the years. And it was it was the script and the narration is by Dalia Oppenheimer, who is the daughter of Rabbi Abramowitz, who fortunately is still with us and is about 95 years old. And so if you want to see about 27 minutes, 6 minutes of Cuba more or less, and 20 of the Cuban Jewish community here. I think you will see something interesting, you know, in a short time. I want to say that I was looking forward to this event, and I'm glad all of you came. I wish, you know, we had a larger group one time, maybe more will come. And you want to bring questions? Thank you very much.
It's now afternoon. We're running a little late, but I came back from Germany last week and they were even later, so we're doing okay for Cuban time. So we have about, I think, 15 minutes for questions and answers, and what I would propose is to take a few of the questions and then ask the panelists to respond. And please be brief and to the point so that we can hear again from our panelists. Yes.
I'd like to know what is the reaction, especially from Dr. Bahar, what is the reaction of the leadership of the current Jewish community in Cuba on the arrest of Alan Gross? I'll repeat it. What I'd like to know from Dr. Bahar, who has connections with the current leadership of the Cuban Jewish community, what their reaction has been to the arrest of Alan Gross.
We'll take another question and then give them some time to respond. Yes?
My question is mainly for Professor Bejarano, but it is about the fact that there were Jews going to Cuba who ceased being Jews. And in many cases, what they did was they changed their names. And I wonder whether she has studied that. I noticed, for example, in one of the presentations that there was a man named Gustavo Gutierrez as president of the association. And I don't know some Gutierrez who were actually Jewish that had, ceased being Jewish.
Thank you. We have another question in the back?
Yeah.
Yes,
So
please.
thank you so much for your presentation. This was really wonderful, and this is actually a great follow-up to that last question about naming. So one of the ways that transformation is noted, right, transformation in identity and understanding of self is through the naming, right? So I'm curious about how, and it was woven throughout your presentations, I'm curious about how it is that in terms of endearment and the way the names people give their children, and also the phenomenon of people changing their names, Hispanicizing their names, or taking on Spanish names, whether or not, how that was woven through the stories that you all witnessed to.
Okay, thank you. We'll take another question from this side of the room. Yes, please.
Actually, I didn't have a question. I had a couple of comments. One with regards to, I think it was Caroline maybe that said that in her interviews, she had been told that the American Jewish community had been kind of indifferent to the arrival of the Cuban Jews here, and perhaps even a little bit antagonistic. I think that may have been the American Jewish community on Miami Beach, because my experience was different. Marcos mentioned an organization which was probably the only organization that was available to us at the time. There was no Cuban Refugee Center, etc., which was HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which was extremely helpful to some of us who arrived. And I recall that it was in the days when some of us could not afford to live on Miami Beach and had to go out to this place called Hialeah, which we all confused with Hialeah because that's what it said in the back of the buses. And we were taken in by Temple Tefereth Jacob and the rabbi there called Maurice Klein. And they were wonderful with us, providing us with education, facilities, etc. So my personal experience was totally different than what you were told. With regards to what's happening to our community, and I'm a member of Temple Moses. My father is a past president of Temple Moses, or was a past president of Temple Moses. Temple Moses was indeed in a severe decline for quite some time, but I'm happy to tell you that has been significantly reversed. And it is now a flourishing institution.
It's called leadership.
Of different character, though, because it's no longer a monopoly of principally Turkish Jews. You have Moroccan Jews, you have Argentinian Jews, you have Colombian Jews, you have Venezuelan Jews, you have Jews from all over the place. And therefore, the nature, the fabric of the community changes. But it's a very vibrant and alive institution. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We'll allow the panelists to respond then. Margarita, you want to start?
The question of Jews who were there, or actually descendants of Jews, of conversos who were living in Cuba, this is I think a new subject of studies, and I don't think that anybody is expert on this at this time. But it is evident that there were a few families who are descendants of conversos. Some of them passed this tradition inside the families, but others forgot about it. But the fact that a person named like Gustavo Gutierrez, maybe his predecessors were conversos, this doesn't mean that he was Jewish. He really helped. Gustavo Gutierrez was a lawyer, and he was a member of UNRWA. He helped working on the refugees. As far as I know, he was not a Jew. He never identified as a Jew. He was very sympathetic to the Jewish cause and did a lot for it. But I don't think he was Jewish. He didn't identify as such.
Yeah, so the question about Alan Gross. The community, as far as I've been able to see, has been supportive of him. I know that they bring him honey cake, for example, for Rosh Hashanah. They bring him matzah on Passover. So I've actually happened to coincide in Cuba in moments when Adela Dor and the leader of the community has mentioned, oh, we're bringing this gift to Alan Gross. So I know that they're in communication with him, and at least from the Jewish perspective, from the perspective of Jewish solidarity, they've been supportive of him. But the community's in a delicate position, on the other hand, because they also need to be able to maintain their community as a community. So they can't get involved politically with Alan Gross's case, but they have been supportive of him from the perspective of Jewish solidarity and bringing him things for the various Jewish holidays. So that's what I'm aware of from what I've been able to observe during the
I don't have much to say other than I really thank you for your comments, and that's exactly why I wanted to have kind of a dialogue, because my research ended at a specific moment, and sometimes it's hard to draw big conclusions based on specific incidents or trends that might be in place at a specific time. So that's very helpful, and I'm thrilled to hear that tuberculosis is thriving, excuse me.
Big time.
Big time. Excellent. That's great news. And on your question about naming, I'm sorry, I don't have, I don't know, Ruth, if you have anything on that. I mean, I didn't, nobody that I interviewed, for example, that I can think of, changed their names. I mean, obviously, one theme that oftentimes recurred is that one way of evoking continuity with the Jewish-Cuban past for many families was to give their American-born children Hispanic names, right? So many young people talked about how they had a Spanish name, but ways in which they would create nicknames for themselves around American friends, for example, so that they would integrate. And then many times you'd hear them say, well, as I became a teenager, I really came to identify with my original name more and more, because I felt like that gave me a unique identity. So that was a theme that I heard with respect to first names.
One of the things I know you might be aware of, that recently the Spanish government released about 5,200 names, which are common Spanish surnames, which seem to may have a Jewish ancestry. So many of the names that end with EZ, like Gonzalez, Martinez, Lopez, and all those, may have. I understand the Spanish government, if you can prove that you have a Judaic background, you will be able to get your Spanish citizenship. So that's something that you will see as time passes, more and more, especially the Cubans that want to find a way of going through the Spanish ancestry, be able to do it.
But if I can add one sentence, the Spanish government, the names are not enough. They want people to know Latino or to have some sort of Jewish identity, and not just a name.
That list is false.
We'll take a second
Yes,
round of.
Yep, sure.
Incidentally, I worked with a Spanish woman who was asked by the Spanish embassy in Israel to collaborate on this. And she told me that the list that is on internet was prepared by Jews and not by the Spanish government, and they are still working on the list didn't come out.
And the law has not passed yet.
Okay. We'll take a
I'm
second
keeping
round
track.
of questions, please. Yes, and then I think we have to close.
I
Yes.
want you to go over a little bit of the question regarding Alan Gross. I understand
The
that,
microphone.
William Miller, the then designated president of the community by his grandfather and Adela, and also the president of ORD, an organization regarding technology and all that, declared in the trial of Alan Gross, and in a conversation that we have on Facebook, he never showed me his face or called me or anything, told me that he did in the trial, and he said in the trial things for the community that afterwards they did not appreciate it and kicked them out of the community, and I don't know where he's at now. Do you know anything about this?
Okay, let's take a few more questions, and then any other questions on this side? Yes? No?
No, I just wanted to find out, because I have heard many times that Fidel Castro, his last name is Fidel Castro Root, and that he has, eugenic background. And is this true?
Okay, are there any other questions for the panel? Okay, so then we'll let, what do you want to
Okay. As for Fidel, I'll start with Fidel Castro and then on something on Aaron Roth. There are people who spoke with Fidel Castro, and one of them was the ambassador of Cuba in Israel, who was a German Jew living in Cuba for many years, and he supported Fidel Castro. And he gave a sort of testimony saying that Fidel told him that he was from Jewish ancestry. Now, Alina, the daughter of Fidel, wrote in her book that somebody told me that this is all fantasy. That also that her mother was from a Jewish Turkish family, but apparently it was an invention. So, but Fidel said, also he said to Bernardo Benes that he was from a Jewish descent. But again, who knows, maybe the name Castro was a Jewish name, there are many Jews. I wouldn't take it too seriously. And I don't think that it has any meaning. I mean, the fact that maybe his tatarabuelos, how do you say, had a Jewish blood, it doesn't mean he didn't grow up as a Jew. And as I know that William Miller moved to the Sephardic synagogue, to the Sephardic congregation in Havana, because of the Alan Gross situation. But I think that it's very difficult to know the truth of what is going on in Cuba. So I wouldn't dare to speculate.
Okay, I think we'll close here, and remember at 1:15 we'll reconvene for Adiós Queridas, so we invite you to stay over. Thank you very much.
Okay.